Hey guys, just up top, I am so excited to tell you that my book is finally available! Yay! It is available in many stores including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Booktopia and Apple iBook Store. You can get it in paperback and in the ebook version, and it's still being distributed to other bookstores. So if there is a bookstore that's like your favorite, your go-to, maybe within 2 weeks it will be there. And if not, you can always contact them and let them know that you want to order it in, and they can do that for you. So I really hope you enjoy the book as much as you enjoy the podcast. Just a heads up though, this podcast was actually recorded 2 weeks ago, so we did talk about how it was still in the proofing stages, and that's true for the time, but it's not true for now. It is definitely available. So if you want to support me and read along with the chapters as you listen to the episodes, go grab yourself a copy of the book, and I really hope you like it. So let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of How to Conserve Conservationists, and this episode is based on chapter 4, which is Taking the You Out of Failure. I'm Jessie and I'm here with Todd.
Does that leave you with failure?
That could have been the chapter title, but I don't know if that would have made sense to people. They'll be like, where's the you? There's no you in failure. I don't know. So just trust the system.
Sounds like a new app to download.
If you buy the book, you'll realize that my chapter titles are actually freaking weird. They're very weird. As we go on in the podcast, you will see that.
I've seen the table of contents and it doesn't look like it belongs in a book.
But I think that's the Jessie flair. I just wanted to have some creative freedom with my chapter titles. Don't you ever read a book and you're like, oh, what a boring chapter? That will not happen with me.
Well, how often do you get to write a book and now you can decide what a chapter should be?
Yeah.
It's yours. You can make it whatever you want.
So some that Todd's from reading the chapter title, I would not know what the content of this book is.
It does make me difficult to keep track of what each one is about.
But I guess because I ramble a lot in the book and talk about personal stories, if I get off topic, it's a bit ambiguous what the topic was. So it's kind of a fail-safe.
Yeah.
I'm just full of life hacks. If you're not sure about something, just be ambiguous and it will be fine. Nobody can hold it against you. But anyway, today we are talking about failure because the reason I did a whole chapter about failure is because the conservation industry is so tight on resources, so tight on funding. It's very, very competitive. I feel like there's not a lot of room to fail.
I thought it was because you went to a failure conference and came back very excited with whole new concepts about what failure is.
I didn't go to a failure conference. I was asked to speak on a panel at a failure conference.
I mean, that
says
something.
It wasn't a conference about failure. It was one panel session on failure.
Okay.
Yeah, it was how to fail effectively or something. It was good. Anyway, I think the community knows about this obsession with failure now because I created a failure wall where...
These are the tidbits that you picked up.
Yeah, I was so excited to find out that there was this person in a corporate office, and they had a failure wall so people could showcase their failures and learn from each other. I think that doesn't happen in conservation a lot. If everybody's only talking about their success stories, how are we learning from each other's failures? And does that mean we keep making the same mistake over and over and over again? For me, it's so constructive to talk about failures. It's so important to talk about failures because as I mentioned in the last episode, I learn from failures. That is my prime method of learning. It is not from studying. It is not from doing. It is from failing. So I feel as a community, what I love about the failure wall as well is that people from upper management have written on there how they failed. And I think that's important for me because I think when you're early in your career, you think, oh, I'm shit and I'm failing because I'm young and inexperienced. It's important to note that you keep failing your whole life. And you're not a bad person for failing. I am on team make failure destigmatized and make it celebrated, because the more we talk about failures, the more we learn from them, the more we can achieve better things because we're aware of what could go wrong and how to mitigate that for next time.
It's sort of the counter to perfectionism.
Yeah.
Because that's usually like if you're in a job interview and they say, "What's your biggest, weakness?" I'm like, "Oh, I guess I'm just a perfectionist," and it's meant to be spin as if that's really a positive thing
I don't
about
think
you.
it's a positive thing, to be honest. I think perfectionism actually constrains a lot of people.
It does. It makes you too scared to fail, and you end up just being paralyzed.
Yeah, you don't do anything. I would rather fail at a billion things than just be perfect and not do anything.
Literally a billion things.
Well, it's funny because Lonely Conservationist came about because of 26 years of failing to get a conservation job. Like, this whole amazing organization, like this whole amazing community is founded on 26 years of me failing.
You thought it was based on like your frustrations with the industry, but actually it's you personally failing with the industry.
If I had never failed so much to get a secure job in the industry, I would not have this community. Like, for me, the best things of my life have come out of failure. Like, when I met Todd, I swore off men. I failed and ended up getting with him, and now we're engaged. Like, failure is so like pivotal in the best things in my life.
So I'm a little bit skeptical of this mindset, because to me, I think really what you're doing is having the attitude of like, oh, well, there's probably a silver lining to this problem, and just look on the bright side. And if you shouldn't glorify failure on its own as a good thing inherently.
I think we should. If you remember back to the last episode where I told the story about the conservationists going into the village and saying, we need you to move out of the village because we want to protect your monkeys, and then they killed all the monkeys, I bet those conservationists would never have gone back to another village and did that again. Like, why?
Why did they know that like that's what happened?
Like, why would you actively, as a conservationist, do something that ends up killing the last population of mangabees and then do that again to kill another population of monkeys? Like, that's stupid. So for me, learning from that mistake, learning from that failure, because that is a failure. You killed monkeys. Learning from that.
Their blood is on your hands.
Yeah, like, learning from that is important. Like, for me, like...
Well, that's what I mean. You're trying to take the positive out of the situation. What we learned is going up to native villages and telling them to bugger off is not a winning strategy.
Yeah, you failed, but you'll never do it again. And hopefully, because they published that in a paper, nobody would do it again. Because what if they never talked about it and everyone's telling people to move out of their villages and all these monkeys are dying all over the world? Because they talked about... Like, how would I know about this story if it was never talked about? Now I carry that with me for the rest of my life, and it shaped how I see myself as a conservationist.
I suppose that's sort of like the baseline level of the best you could get out of a failure is know that exact thing is a bad idea. Yeah.
And I think
usually you might get even more out of it. So like I work on like a new project, and I'll be like, oh, I'm gonna make a Bluetooth gadget, and I'll spend like a year on it, and it never works out. Like, I can't make it work super great. But I spent a year working on Bluetooth gadgets, and now I have a year of experience working on Bluetooth gadgets. Like, I learned a lot out of it.
See?
It wasn't a complete waste of time.
Exactly.
Even though the project itself was a failure.
And you're saying we shouldn't glorify failure, and yet you've learned a year about Bluetooth gadgets.
But that's what I love about your attitude, though, is like, don't even take it like, oh, look on the bright side. There were hidden good things that happened out of this, even in a situation where a population of monkeys were murdered. You're like, this is a good thing because we can learn.
Yeah, learning is powerful.
That was a bad idea.
Because like when you're a kid, you make so many mistakes, and it's so normal. Like, that's how you learn. You learn not to like put your fingers on the stove.
Was the Titanic sinking a good failure?
Well, has a Titanic sunk ever since?
I think boats have sunk.
I mean, have they crashed into an iceberg in the same... Like, now we know that
the exact same iceberg.
Smaller in the top and bigger in the bottom. Did they even know that then? I'm not sure. They must have. Was it? People must have known about icebergs back then.
I remember as a kid, I thought the Titanic happened like 300 years ago for some reason.
I don't think it was that long ago.
Which made me very open to making fun of it because it's a funny mental image.
You know what really makes me mad is when I can predict a failure and then there's nothing I can do to mitigate it. Like when I was a kid, my brother was going to put 2-minute noodles in the microwave without any water, and I knew it would burn the microwave down. And nothing I said to him would stop him from doing that. So he eventually put the dry noodles in the microwave, and all of a sudden it like burnt to a black crisp. There was a little flame, and I was like, you could have burnt the whole house down. And I'd literally told you 1,000 times, like begging you, please do not do this. But he had to do that to learn. You need to put water with the noodles to cook
that's
the
what I mean.
noodles.
How far can you take this attitude? Because there must be some merit to stopping and thinking about what you're going to do and what the potential outcomes are.
But just say, like, these conservationists...
And to be fair, if you stop and plan and try to be a perfectionist and never make mistakes, you're going to be stuck in that planning stage forever.
No, but like, what if these conservationists went to the village and they had thought about it? They're like, let's ask them to move. Let's give them a new camp. Like, let's fully furnish... Let's make the new camp better than their old camp. They really thought about it, and then they still killed the monkeys. Like, there's no mitigating that. Like, there's still... With failure, you can think and plan as much as you want, but some things just still fail.
Yeah, but there's also your brother just setting things on fire for the heck of it, and you know it's going to end bad.
Yeah. Well, I think...
He knows it's going to end bad.
Well,
he does it anyway.
Is that a failure of my communication, like not being effective enough, or is that a failure of his listening?
There's a long series of failures in that span of your childhood.
I feel like if anyone has a brother, you will know that like they're a loophole. Like they're like you can't do anything about them. Like they're uncontrollable. They're just, especially younger brothers, they're just...
Well, this is what I mean. The way you talk about failure is like everyone as adults, every organization and company should just act like an 11-year-old boy dicking around.
No. Well, this is what it's like I'm saying about the failure wall. It's like, just say...
I'm just not convinced by this mentality.
Just say I was the person that killed all the monkeys and I write it on the wall. Nobody in that office is going to kill the monkeys again. And then like... You failed in your Bluetooth, so you put that on the wall. Every mistake you made in the code, nobody's going to use that code the wrong one. So I think, like, for me, talking about your mistakes and using them as learning opportunities is a really effective strategy in a business. But I feel my experience in conservation is that it's too resource poor, too time poor, too, like, money poor, that there is this expectation of perfectionism, and I have not been allowed to make mistakes. Like, mistake making is only able to be facilitated if the higher ups foster that culture of failure being positive. Like, I can't come into a business and come in with this failure positive attitude as somebody in the lowest rung. Like, that just won't fly. And I know this because I've been in organization after organization after organization where I have been actively, like, I've had to quit my job because of how badly I was treated for failing.
Yeah.
I don't think we should, like...
Name names, spill the tea.
Well, like, to give an opposite situation, on LinkedIn I saw this post. It blew my mind. It actually, like, I could not believe it was true. Somebody had written... I made a huge mistake in my organization. It was catastrophic. My boss talked to me and he pulled me aside and he's like, you did this. This is how we're going to mitigate this. We're not going to do this again. In the future, we're going to do this and this. My relationship wasn't tainted by this. We both went about our days. I didn't feel bad about myself for the rest of the day. We have normal, like, chats now. Like, that there was an isolated incident where it was mitigated and then everything else went back to normal. That has never happened with me before. Like, I was fantasizing over this. I wish
what
bosses...
if you just talked it out and said, okay, we'll do this from now on. Good to know.
I wish bosses have done that, because bosses have literally waited until there was nobody else in the office, relentlessly yelled at me, and when I have said, like, I am sorry, this is what I would do to mitigate it in the future. They like reprimand me for talking about the future when I made the mistake in the past.
There might be practical things like the mess has been made, you need to clean it up before you start
like there was nothing,
making more messes down the road.
Like, I talk about this story in the book, but basically, like, a boss had covered a shift for me. It was all above board. Like, I'd given advance notice because I was sick. And then Google actually had an address wrong, which sparked, like, I don't know. It was like one person went to the wrong place. And apparently that was catastrophic. That was one person going to the wrong place because Google had an address wrong was enough to corner me in the office, yell at me. And basically she was saying, like, I have so much on my plate. How dare you make me take this shift? How dare you make me work for you when she's the one who offered and it was all prearranged earlier. Like, there's layers of toxicity.
That's just a personal problem and being a bit fed up with the whole situation and unloading it inappropriately.
Like, very inappropriately. Like, I could not sleep before I went to work every shift after that. Like, I was terrified to go to work, and I eventually had to quit that job because she was just so horrible to me in the way that she dealt with it. Nobody should be reprimanded, like, in an isolated space and just yelled at for like half an hour. It's not constructive.
So would you say, I know you just want to rant about your old boss.
I do.
Would you say it's not so much turning failures into positives, but reframing how you and the organization respond to failure?
I guess that might be a more appropriate situation. Like, I'm not saying celebrate the fact that I had led this person astray.
Because that's the distinction I'm making. For me, like, failing on its own, like, it would have been better if it succeeded. Like, the fact that it failed is a bit of a downer, no matter how you spin it. But, like, you can spin it and say, oh, well, we got this deal, you know, the house didn't catch fire, you know, no monkeys died. You know, relatively, it's not too
Every
bad.
time I make a mistake, I'm like, no monkeys are dead. It's not that bad.
So, like, you know, you're doing better than those researchers.
I think it's like, if we learn how to communicate effectively about failure, we could be really progressive in the workplace and do a lot of amazing things. Like, just say I had made that mistake and she handled it in a good way, and she was like, oh, hey, Jessie, I just wanted to let you know about something that happened on the trip. You actually accidentally, I'm sure, gave the wrong address. Thankfully...
Maybe you maliciously gave the wrong address.
Thankfully, like, none of the volunteers were impacted. It was just one staff member. Like, so we're saved by the bell. It was only one staff member. We ended up sorting it out. If this were to happen again, I would maybe ring up... You
might need to start double checking these addresses.
Yeah, I'd maybe ring up the location and say, can I just confirm your address with you? Because I've mentioned I'm from Adelaide. I moved to Melbourne. This was like the first months that I was living here. I would have no idea that this address could be wrong because I didn't know any suburb.
It could have been an address for somewhere in Spain and you would have just happily pasted it into the email.
Yeah, so like if I was copying it straight from Google, I just assumed it was correct. I don't know.
Usually right.
Yeah, usually it's right. It was just bad luck. If I was like the boss, I would be like, that's so unfortunate that Google happened to be wrong that time. Not
to pass the bucket, not to place the blame.
Yeah, like, I'm sorry this happened, but luckily only one staff member was affected. Like, because you're in a role where it's a lot of engagement with the community, because we're doing this event, maybe just give the venue a call next time to see what their address is, just to confirm. And if they say, oh, that's weird, it should be on Google, just say, well, we've had an incident where it's been wrong in the past, so just clarify it with them. That's all. Like, we had a really great time. I'm sorry you weren't there. Because I did this shift, if you want to cover and let me have a day off anytime this month, it would be really appreciated. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Like, that could have been a great conversation that allowed me...
Tell your old boss.
That would have been a great conversation that allowed me to know what to do next time. Maybe even build better relationships with the venues that we were going to, because I would have called everyone and like had that conversation with them. it would have made me like so excited to work in a space where I had a boss that I knew was going to support me and let me have sick days, and like I would feel confident about and like excited about giving her some time off later as well. Like I knew she did a favor for me. I would be really excited to take over and do a favor for her. But I shouldn't have been not sleeping because of that incident. Like I shouldn't have been
like
that
after
stressed.
the fact. Like
Yeah.
it's all fine now.
And for weeks afterwards,
But she's still holding it over you. Yeah.
like I was like, I feel horrible in this job. I want to leave, but there's one event that I'm planning. I know I'm going to blow it out of the park. It's going to be amazing. And it was amazing. And there was people at this event that's like, Jessie, I donated extra money to this cause this week because of you. I'm really admiring the work that you're doing. And she still was reprimanding me after that event, even though the volunteers had a great time. We got extra donations explicitly because of the work I was doing. So that was a time where I had to acknowledge nothing I can do is going to be successful in this space. Like sometimes it's not you that's a failure, it's the environment. Like they say, if a flower dies, you fix the environment, you don't try and fix the flower. You don't start getting out sticky tape and trying to stay back up.
I mean, I would.
So I think like if we're able to have these constructive conversations in the workplace, you could see like from how she handled it and how I would have handled it, it sets two very different tones. And like instead of me not sleeping and then I was so scared I was making even more mistakes in that job because I was so afraid of doing anything. Every little thing I did, like I was afraid it was going to be wrong. I wasn't doing the proper work.
Yeah. So that's the whole attitude that you find super not useful.
Yeah, like if you're supportive of mistakes and like what one staff member went to the wrong place, whoop-de-doo.
This is where differences might come. So like you're like supportive and celebrate mistakes and failures, and I'm happy much more to be like I'm tolerant of failures. I can accept that they happen.
Yeah.
Well, don't make too big a deal out of it than it needs to be, but like don't shoot for it.
Yeah, obviously don't shoot for it, but if it does happen, I don't think we should.
Can I give an example that's less personal to you and abstract so that you don't rant on about old bosses for too long?
Sure, go for it.
So what you're saying is, say someone's doing their final high school exams and like this exam is going to be changing their short-term future life.
Like they will get into psychology where they need a 99.9 if they pass this exam. If they don't, they have to repeat the year.
Tertiary course, yeah. So if they take that exam and fail it, to me that's like it's irredeemably bad news.
Well, this actually happened to my friend.
In that case, the best case you can do is react to it better. Some people might fail high school and then spend the next 3 years on the couch watching cartoons, getting drunk. I'm not saying this from personal experience, but like I could imagine a bit of a downward spiral after that. But if you had the attitude of failure, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like you don't compound the issue.
Don't add other stuff on top of it. So this actually happened to my friend. She wanted to get into psychology. She ended up not getting in, and she took a gap year between her undergrad and her master's because she didn't get into the master's program. She ended up working a practice, like just as an entry-level job, volunteering for that year, and that helped her get into the master's program the next year, and she'd already had that experience.
It's not much of a gap year if you just start doing the job.
Well, I mean, like there was a year between her undergrad and the master's. So for the fact that she could get experience in the field and then go into her master's with that prior knowledge, like that was a great way to handle that failure instead of just sitting on the couch eating Doritos all day.
Yeah. As appealing as that is.
Yeah, well, I'm like the kind of person that will never sit on the couch eating Doritos. Like in the first episode, Todd talked about like me sitting around twiddling my thumbs because I'm not getting paid to do anything. But realistically, like I'm doing science, I'm publishing a book, I'm making this podcast, I do all the social media for Lonely Conservationist, I edit and publish the blogs. Sorry, there's like so much I'm doing in the day that it would be a failure to me to relax. And I think this is important. So many conservationists think when they relax, they are failing. And there's this immense guilt associated with relaxation failure.
This has happened with shark scientists who feel like if they stop swimming, they drown.
Oh my God. I know that's a joke, but like there was this shark scientist at my uni that everyone thought was so hot. And so nobody went to like any of the lectures. They might look at it online, but when he was presenting, it will be a packed lecture theatre.
You've got to be there in person.
He actually made people come to the lectures. So
he sounds like a great teacher.
So I guess you're right. Like he always made people keep swimming.
I just know it as a very often overused, very silly phrase that
the shark has to keep swimming or else it would die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
like people sleep. Like
I think that's how
everyone takes a break.
I think that's how conservationists are. And actually, like the thing that was very appealing about Todd in the beginning is that I took a nap with him, and that I was like, oh my God, I've rested
this
for
is
the
an option?
first time in years. Like I've never felt this rested before.
Just sleeping. You forgot to.
Yeah, and I was like, Todd equals rest. I was like, got hooked on it. Like, because I think, like, being with you meant that it was still doing something, and it wasn't, like, I couldn't not feel guilty about it, or, like, I didn't feel guilty about it because being with you was, like, a productive thing, like, I was fostering this relationship, but it allowed me to rest for the first time with the illusion that it was still productive. And I think, like, this is something I still battle with now, and like I know a lot of conservationists battle with is like they feel guilty for resting, and then their rest isn't actually rest because it's just being guilty.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be a lot to do with like because they're so passionate and personally involved with it potentially.
Yeah.
Like if you're a accountant, you're not going to like go home and like, man, I just really love accounting. I'm going to watch YouTube videos about accounting. To be fair, you do that. You get paid to do a job every day and then you come home and watch a video about penetration testing. Yeah.
Which to everybody else, it's not like what you think. It's about hacking. Yeah. When everybody asks what you do, I'm like, oh, he's an official penetrator.
Well, like, I guess a lot of conservationists have sort of clued in that if you are super passionate about it and you do it, you know, outside of your day job and like make it your whole life, you do tend to be better than the average Joe in that industry.
And
that can be super useful. In
the same vein, if I'm not getting paid, I don't have a set time. Like I'm not on the clock from 9 to 5. I will wake up at 6 in the morning, I'll post this.
You're sort of
podcast.
Your own boss, so you can make your own hours.
Okay, like there's sometimes because of time differences, I meet with a lot of American and European scientists. So I'll get up for a meeting where I have to be at the meeting at 6 a.m. to meet them because it's like normal time for them. Before that meeting, I will post the blog of the day, and then after I will work on some science, and then I'll be working from like 6 a.m. to like when Todd gets home at like 5. That's not normal, and because I'm not on the clock, like officially I'm not getting paid, there's no set time for me to work, and then that's how people get so burnt out, is because like when do we rest? If I'm not resting, if I'm resting, I'm wasting time, or like everybody else around me is working, why am I resting? Like the fact that you're at work every day making money makes me feel bad. If I was to sit on the couch all day and eat Doritos, I would think I'm a failure then, because I'm not contributing financially to the household, but I feel like I'm contributing at least something to the world that's positive.
Yeah, you're not helping society by being a consumer, paying taxes. I guess you're helping society.
But then the thing is, like on the flip side of that, if we never rest, that's when our cells, and like if our body is always on high alert, our body can never rest and relax and produce like healthy cells, and that's when you get really horrible things like cancers and stuff happening, because your body actually needs time to recuperate and to like just reset all the functions and make sure you're like mitosising and meiosis properly. So
people forget to do that.
Yeah, I know. You got to mitosis effectively, and to mitosis effectively, you have to chill out. So like this week, after I press publish on the book, and it was like just the
Available in all good bookstores everywhere from a couple months from now.
Nah, I don't. Like a couple of weeks, I think. It won't be too long.
Not long at all, in fact, because it's available now. Go get my book wherever you get your books. Yay!
So basically, like the book, all I have to do left is I've been checking how it looks in the book form. Like I have to check the margins and if I like the page numbers. So it was kind of like easier stuff. Like so this week I like finalized the book, sent it off, and I released a podcast. I really needed to stop. I really needed to be like, this was the end of an era. I've done some things. I need to just break. But my brain's like, I got to find a way to earn an income. I got to work on it. I got to keep busy. But then there's one day I was just like, I came to my computer and I almost started crying. I was just like so overwhelmed and exhausted. And I was like, I'm going to the couch and I'm putting on the shittest TV show I can find. And this is productive because I'm going to reset my body. My cells are going to relax. I'm going to not get really sick. And then because I'm not working myself to sickness, which obviously in this time of the pandemic, you don't want to be sick, because
it's a bad look.
I'm letting myself rest, then I can go into the next day with a fresh brain, clear plan, and everything.
You need to consciously do that and like consider it as a thing on your to-do list though.
Because like one of the Lonely Conservationists, Rachel actually, who hosts the workshops for Lonely Conversationists, she convinced me to take a week off because with the pandemic we've been stuck inside all year. Like Melbourne is the most like lockdown place ever. Like we literally have been stuck inside. We haven't been able to go on any holidays away from the weekend. We can't even go out to brunch. So
only other Melbourne people understand the price of that.
Brunch is life here. Anyway, like a couple of months ago, she was like, just take a week off and just do nothing. In that week, I came up with the idea of the book because for the first time, I'd let myself relax, think about like, what am I doing with my life? And I thought like, so over the past 22 months or however long it's been, I've done all this research, I've had all these experiences, I've talked to all these people. Even just for myself, it would be beneficial to collate this information into a tangible thing, even just as a resource for myself to look back on. And it wasn't until I took that week off that I had the like foresight to do that. So I think we shouldn't be feeling rest guilt. I think this is a stigma we need to break.
Okay.
Like you're not failing for resting because
my final test of failure.
Yeah.
You've written this book.
Yeah.
Back and forth, edited it, but double checked it. You get a early copy in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
You open it up.
Typo straight there.
Typo, they spelled your name wrong. Would you celebrate that failure?
Yeah, I think I'd have to for my own sanity. Because every time I look at the book, I notice something. And it's always something small, like not having a hyphen between the well and being.
We're pretty sure your name's spelled correctly.
Yeah, I even got Todd to double check my name because I was like, oh, the worst thing is
do I know my own name?
If I assume it's spelled correctly and I don't look at it, what's the chances that it's not spelled correctly? So like, I think having humility, like I notice books, like I'm reading a novel right now, it's fiction. It's like one of the first fiction books I've read in a while. And it says, don't be silly, you don't find tigers in the rainforest. And I was like, are you kidding? Where else do you find tigers? Like, so from my perspective in Sumatra, like that's where the tigers were. So even in books I read, I see mistakes or I see like non-facts, anti-facts, false pieces of information. And I don't, that one fact about tigers didn't dampen the rest of the book. It's still a really good book. So if I take that approach with my own work, like if people find one thing that's kind of wrong, hopefully that won't ruin the rest of the book. Like you'd be really pedantic to think that it will.
You or anyone won't be reading it thinking that it's gospel, perfect word from God.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like I have made such an effort to talk about, I do talk about my own science, but it's mostly like autobiographical. Like I'm just pulling my own stories and things that I've heard from people in my community. So I've done that in a way to know like this may not apply to everybody. Like I cannot speak from all conservationists, from like a mother to a person with a shotgun defending a rhino, I cannot speak to all of their personal experiences. I can just speak what has applied to me and what has resonated with my community. So, like, don't take what I say as, like, this is standard for everyone as well. Take it with a grain of salt. Like, this is just what I think. Jessie's thoughts. It could also be titled, but it's a worse name.
I mean, that's most books, though, isn't it? Here's what I think about this.
Yeah. I mean, like, why do we keep thinking that books are so rigorous and, like, this is the standard for everything? Anyway, that's not really about failure anymore. I guess I should ask you, we talked about a lot about what it's like in conservation in my experience. In your field, do you think failure is handled well? Is there, like, because there's more resources, there's more money, is failure handled better? Is there less perfectionism because there's more abundance in your field?
It's, well, like, different workplaces have different sort of cultures about it. So some places, you know, if you're some shiny Uber startup company, you know, Uber makes, oh no, we opened up in this new city and it turns out it's illegal. We broke the law and we got fined $500,000. Like, the person who did that isn't getting fired about that. Uber has an attitude of like, well, you know, we're breaking new ground and, you know, abusing women.
Are you going to get sued now?
Am I?
For mentioning Uber and that they abuse women and that
Allegedly, there are current ongoing court cases.
Allegations
that...
It's all alleged.
Yes, but like, you know, they don't see failure as a problem, almost to a detriment. This is why maybe I'm so skeptical of the notion. But there's, certainly more like established organizations, or they're very like prideful. I'm trying to think of one. I guess like any government, if you're the, you know, minister for finance and you get the accounting numbers wrong, that's just going to be doubly embarrassing. And it's going to be in the newspapers, and now like, oh, if you're on national TV and they're saying you're a minister of finance, how'd you get this number wrong, doofus?
I guess
so. Like, it's a really super simple. Anyone could make that failure.
Yeah.
This isn't a particular person I'm thinking of now, so they can't sue me. But like, everyone's human, everyone makes failure, but in that case, like, he's not allowed to. So you end up with a very perfectionist culture, and everyone like 10 times checks things. I
guess that's the thing, like, so in conservation, perfectionism comes from a lack of resources, which is my opinion. I think perfectionism comes from a lack of abundance. Whereas in like the political climate, it's about like, you don't want the Murdoch press coming at you saying that you like you went to a brothel last night and now it's all over the news. Like, you have to not fail, otherwise it will destroy your reputation. Like, every job has a different pressure. If you're a surgeon, if you fail, you could kill somebody. Yeah, like, you know, brain surgeon's going to be has to be perfectionist, doesn't it? Yeah, that's true. So I guess like every workplace has a level of failure that they can tolerate. Yeah. So you reckon it's because of everyone's like scrapping for a bit of money and help and assets, but is it because like conservationists feel like the stakes are really high? Well, they are, because firstly it's species conservation, where it's like your population of whatever could be on the line, and especially if you're got the shotgun and you're standing next to the last rhino. If that rhino dies, you feel a bit personally responsible. If you fail to do that, you're going to feel a bit shit. But also, like, this is what I experienced a lot when I was in my undergrad and I was traveling and working on volunteer projects overseas, is that a lot of wildlife rehabilitation programs don't rehabilitate or don't release their species because there's a high failure rate, and they know this. So if you spent years and years looking after, or for me, in my case, it was vervet monkeys. If there's vervet monkeys that are there now when I was there in 2012, and so the people are not releasing the animals because they know it's a high failure rate, and they've become attached to these animals knowing that if they release them, there's a high chance they will die. So there's also like conservation sometimes needs to have this risk. Like, you still need to release animals. Like, what is they will just live the rest of their life in cages. Like, I guess it's like a sacrificial population that survives that makes it worth it for the rest. But like it really depends on the species and like where in the world you are, how abundant the resources are, what the predators are like, what the political climate and the people are like. But
Yeah.
like there's other social factors that play into it as well. Like you fall in love with these animals you've spent all this money caring for.
Well, I guess that's
you don't
where
wanna release
like
them.
failure's a big deal. If you've got, the last 20 pandas in a cage and they're like, well, we could try releasing them into this forest, but, we're pretty sure they won't last without us because they're pandas and they're pretty useless. I've seen videos of baby pandas and I don't think they could make it.
There's a lot of people.
So if they release them and then they die and now there's no more pandas in the world, that's like, a pretty colossal failure.
It is.
Has
and
no
it isn't,
upside.
because it's interesting you choose pandas because a lot of people will argue that evolutionarily should pandas even exist now? They only ovulate for like an hour a year. They're just like the koalas of the ground in China.
My assessment that they're useless was actually pretty accurate.
Yeah, like kakapos, like a ground-dwelling bird in New Zealand, and pandas are two species that I'm not really sure should like their evolutionary value.
I think you told me like feral cats will kill a lot of birds that nest on the ground. And my immediate reaction was, well, if they're nesting on the ground, like they're asking for trouble.
Well, cats shouldn't be in Australia. Like we shouldn't have any placental mammals here. So
you start getting into
it's not the bird's fault, it's the cat's fault for being here. Like that's when you can draw the line. But what eats
other
a panda?
birds realize? Yeah, okay. For pandas, yeah, like it's a legitimate, tricky question.
Yeah.
At the very least.
But like I think because they're such a aesthetic species and they're like the logo of WWF, if they were to go extinct, it would be a huge symbol for conservation as a whole. Like not just them because species go extinct all the time, and more recently than ever since climate change, fires, like natural disasters, human impacts, obviously, like species are constantly going extinct. It's just if a very well-known aesthetic like popular animal goes extinct, it will have more of a backlash. Like if you let the pandas die, it's going to be way worse than if you let a weird species of snail die.
Well, I could picture if you had pandas only could survive now in captivity, there's only 20 of them left, say. I don't know what the actual situation is for pandas. I assume it's about this dire. Like for me, normies and like the public of the world, if we saw in the newspaper, oh, the pandas have died out, we'd be like, oh no. But if they have died out in the wild, but they're just still in cages, that's not really newsworthy and that doesn't really catch a normal person's attention, but that's almost just as sad.
Yeah, if there's no wild animals left.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting though is that in conservation, we sometimes have to talk about the bad stuff and focus on the bad stuff because that's what brings people's empathy in. Like, for instance, some people are not allowed to talk about... Well, okay, here's one. You're not allowed to publish when there's baby rhinos or when rhino populations are increasing or anything about rhinos because as soon as you do, a poacher will come and poach that last rhino. So you're never going to get good news stories about rhinos.
I heard there's rhinos around here.
Yeah, you'll never hear that good news. And also, like, a lot of people... This is way before conservation optimism and this new wave of, like, positive messaging, but it was, like, a lot of people thought that the only way you could get people to donate or to care was to only tell them the doom and gloom. So it meant, like, we're constantly speaking about doom and gloom.
I need a picture of, like, a little baby seal covered in oil that's on fire with like its mother crying.
So what is that
get
doing
my wallet
to
open?
Us? Like if we're only surrounded by doom and gloom, then we think there's only failures happening in the industry because we're not allowed to talk about the good things and celebrate the wins that we do have. So there's kind of that perspective as well.
Yeah, I know from my somewhat outsider's experience, like if I think of conservationists globally, they appear to be failing. Like.
Is that your broad outlook on conservation?
Just because I've heard more and more species are going extinct. And like this was a concept I wanted to bring up, but it's a bit late now, of like conservationists, 10,000 species go extinct a year, probably. I don't know. And that's a failure of the conservationists, but like, it was not really up to them. It was because, blah blah forest
Everyone
got
else.
chopped down.
It was
You
because
know,
of the
this
other
happened.
humans.
Some poacher did this, and now But they have to take it as a personal failure.
Yeah, this is the hard thing. It's like, just say every human on the planet.
You give it your all. You spend
Yeah.
stressed out 20 hours a day trying to save
It's
the
like,
species,
can
and they
you
die
imagine-
anyway.
Can
And
you
you're like,
imagine? You have personally protected the last little sea turtle, like, to the beach, and your arms around it, blocking off all the birds. Nothing's gonna get the sea turtle. It finally makes it to the ocean, and a big shark comes and it's like, and like eats it. Like, that's sometimes how.
That's
it feels.
what I'm picturing in like a cartoonish sense.
Yeah, but like sometimes it's like you spend your life trying to save. Just say if I was like,
You're tearing up.
oh, I'm just so sad about that sea turtle. Just say if like I'm an ornithologist and I'm like
I don't know what that
a
is.
bird scientist.
Okay.
Basically, I kind of am.
Thank you for using the dumb words.
If you want some bird content, head over to my personal Instagram page, ecologist. Some people don't understand that that's what the URL is. They're like ecogest. I'm like, it's just ecologist with my
I
name in
couldn't
it.
spell it if you asked me to.
Anyway, just say if I'm a bird scientist and I I'm on this island, there's albatross everywhere, and I am spending all day dissecting albatross and picking plastic out of their stomach. You get home and
What a job, first of all.
you get home and your friend comes over and gets like a 6-pack of beer and just chucks the rings,
Yeah, the little plastic.
like just out into
Yeah.
the gutter, and you're like, what the hell? Like, I have spent all day cutting plastic out of an albatross, and I come home and you just carelessly like chuck it out the window. Like, I think it's that kind of, you're so invested in saving something, and then people don't even think about it. Like, it's just that
so not on their radar.
they would never consider this plastic ring to have anything to do with the fate of the albatross.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, like, similarly to the episode where we talk about killing ducks, like, it's not our fault that the ducks are dying. It's not our fault the albatross are dying. We are doing whatever we can to save the ducks and the albatross. Like, ornithologists carrying everyone. Like, thank you, ornithologists. But, like,
What do they study?
birds. I just said that.
I-
Listen.
Use the dumb words, please.
Okay. We used spider scientists last
Yes.
episode, now we're using the bird scientists.
Yes.
The bird scientists are doing, like, they're putting the effort in trying to save the birds. Like, if the birds die, that's not on them. Like, they didn't kill the birds.
Do you worry that they do take it personally?
Of course, we all take it personally.
Well, this is what I mean.
But, okay, it's interesting. I think, like, before we end the
There's
podcast...
your technique of like, oh, just look at the silver lining. Oh, it's probably, it wasn't a complete waste of time. It sort of falls flat if.
Well, that's not the conservationist failing. It's like the system, the society. But I think before we end the podcast, I just need to mention something so interesting. Is when I was really focused on failure, I asked my community in a like Instagram slide, I was like, how have you failed? Let's celebrate it. I want to celebrate your failures. Like how we started this conversation, I was pumped to celebrate failures. None of us are killing monkeys. What are we doing? Everybody, what they said that they had failed on, to me wasn't even a failure. I was like, you poor little munchkins.
I didn't tie my shoes up well enough this morning that I had to retie them at lunch. Oh,
It was like-
really screwed the pooch on the today.
I didn't get an opportunity to travel abroad because of COVID. How have you failed? You haven't failed because
Well, this is what I was talking about. They're taking it very personally,
Yeah.
stuff that's completely outside of their control.
I just want to give them a hug because if they think that a global pandemic is them personally failing, what else are they dealing with? Like every day must be so daunting and everything must seem like a failure to them. That the global pandemic stopping you from doing your masters abroad is not a reflection on your capabilities, your knowledge, anything to do with you. You have not failed because of that. Sure, your plans have been like postponed, prolonged. Your plans may have failed. You have not failed as a person. And I think that's super important to mention. That it's important to think about, firstly, going back to my shitty boss, is my failure a reflection of my abilities or somebody else's perception of me? Is my failure a reflection of me as a person and my abilities or the current global climate? is it to do with me like giving as much as I can? Like those albatross people, they're trying so hard to save the albatross, and then somebody chucks a plastic ring. That's not them failing. They are trying as hard as they can. If the whole population of albatross dies, that is not on them. So I think it's important, like, I guess in conclusion, to think about like the environment you're in, and if it's actually you failing or not. Like, if it's the world going to shit, it's not you failing. And if it's like you trying as hard as you can, it's not you failing.
So look on the bright side, and if you can, pass on blame to something else.
No, not pass on the blame. Just, if you have a failure, put it on the failure wall and let me and Todd celebrate it.
Okay.
I think with every failure on the failure wall, an albatross is born. It's fact. So if you guys have failed properly, this has nothing to do with the world, nothing to do with what other people think of you. If you have personally failed at something, put it on the failure wall and let us celebrate you. You can access the failure wall through the website www.lonelyconservationist.com. Add your failures. I've added my failure. I hope it's all anonymous. Nobody knows which one's my failure. No one will know which one's your failure. It's just us as anonymous people celebrating failures and learning from them.
Well, maybe by the context I could tell.
Well, I've not talked about my failure. I did write it in the book.
Have you got a few posts failures on the wall?
I put one post on the wall because I have a hard time thinking about when I've like actually failed. And this is not like an egotism thing. It's like, what have I done that's gone wrong that I haven't benefited from?
That, like, publicly, that would be my reaction if someone said, like, yeah, failure's great, you know, I'm sure you fail all the time, Todd. What's your biggest failure? I'm like, what? No, I don't fail. I'm great at everything.
Well, it's because I have that positive outlook where it's like, I didn't kill the monkeys, everything's fine. Like, I move on, I learn. It's like,
yeah.
What is actually a failure? If I try something and it doesn't go to plan, have I failed? When you learned a year worth of Bluetooth gadgets stuff, like, did you think that you failed?
It would have to be something as visceral as failing a test or exam for me to really consider it.
Exactly.
And think of it in terms of failing.
Exactly. So if you failed a test or exam, not because... Again, if you studied really hard for it and you still
surely
failed,
learned something.
You learned something. Like,
surely.
You must have learned something. Anyway...
What about that fractions test you did?
Oh, yeah.
Where you got...
4 out of 30.
4 out of 30?
That was a failure. I'll put that on the wall.
Nothing was accomplished there.
My teacher was just so bad at teaching me maths because
pass on the blame.
This was primary school, right? I got 4 out of 30 in a fractions test. I go to high school, they put me in an advanced maths. Can you believe it? I cannot. It's like the teaching style was different, and however they taught me in high school just clicked better.
Yeah.
So sometimes, again, like really similarly to the boss situation, sometimes it's not you that's failing, it's your environment that's not right for you. Like, Todd didn't do well in academia, but he's thriving outside of academia. I didn't do well in primary school maths. I did great in high school maths. So I think like this is a good time to self-reflect on the times where you thought you failed, and maybe like think about how you've learned from them, if they were actually a failure, and if it was just, another learning opportunity. Now I know fractions. So we've done 100%, 1/1 of this podcast.
Bit of a flex there.
Just look at me brag about my fraction knowledge.
So I think we came to the conclusion that none of us are really failures after all. So let's hold our head high and move confidently into the future together. If you want to hear more voices in the Lonely Conservationist community, head over to lonelyconservationist.com to read some of the blogs, or maybe even submit your own. I would love you to do that. We're always looking for new stories, new voices. Check us out on social media at Lonely Conservationist on Instagram and at Lonely Conserve on Twitter, or even support us on Patreon at patreon.com/lonelyconservationist. And lastly, remember to buy my book. You can get it at all bookstores. If not now, then in the future it will be available wherever you get your books. And let me know what you think. If you do give it a chance and give it a read, make sure to rate and leave a comment so, I don't know, I can see what you thought, and others can know if it's worth buying as well, I guess. But thank you for listening, and thank you for coming on this journey with me. I will talk to you next week. Bye.